Man lived a normal life with 90% of his brain missing. Imagine you go to the doctor for a little weakness in your leg. It's annoying, but you're not too worried. You figure it's best to get it checked out. They run some tests, including a brain scan, just to be safe. A few hours later, your doctor walks in, looks you dead in the eye with a face of pure disbelief, and shows you this image, your skull, almost entirely filled with black. The doctor tells you that the massive dark space is just fluid. And your brain? Your brain is just a thin, fragile layer of tissue pressed up against the bone. This isn't a sci-fi movie. It's the true story of a 44-year-old man who was living a totally normal life with what looked like only 10% of a brain. His case published in the top-tier medical journal, The Lancet. Back in 2007, didn't just baffle doctors. It blew up everything we thought we knew about the human brain, our memories, our personality, and what it even means to be conscious. How could someone hold down a job, raise a family, and just be with a brain that was barely even there? Section 1. The Ordinary Man and the Extraordinary Discovery. To really get how wild this is, you need to understand just how remarkably unremarkable this guy was. He was a 44-year-old Frenchman, a husband, and a father of 2. He worked as a civil servant, a steady, respectable government job. His life was, for all intents and purposes, normal. He paid his taxes, went on vacations, and dealt with the daily grind of work and family. There was absolutely nothing about him that screamed walking medical miracle. Then, one day, it started. A mild weakness in his left leg that just wouldn't go away. It wasn't crippling, but after 2 weeks, he figured he should probably see a doctor. At the hospital, the examination began. Since a weak limb can be a neurological issue, they decided to run CT and MRI scans to get a look at his brain. This is a routine procedure, done thousands of times a day all over the world. But what showed up on that screen was anything but routine. The techs who saw it first probably thought their billion-dollar machine was on the fritz. The doctors who reviewed the images were just stunned. They were staring at something that shouldn't be possible. Section 2. The shocking revelation. The scans revealed something that defied biology. This man's skull wasn't packed with the dense, wrinkly brain we all have. Instead, most of his head was filled with huge black voids of fluid. These were his brain's ventricles, which are little chambers that produce and circulate cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF. In a healthy brain, they're small in his brain. They had swollen to an absolutely colossal size, taking up around 90% of his skull. The actual brain tissue, the stuff that makes you you, was compressed into a paper-thin layer lining the inside of his skull. Now, to be clear, his brain wasn't missing. It was all there, just squashed into an almost two-dimensional sheet. You know how they say the frontal lobe handles your personality, the temporal lobe holds memories, and so on? Well, here was a man whose lobes were so compressed, you could barely see them. So how was he talking? How did he recognize his own family? How was he showing up to work every day and doing his job? The person standing in front of these doctors was a living, breathing paradox. Section 3. Unraveling the medical mystery. To figure this out, doctors had to dig into the man's past, all the way back to when he was a baby. He was born with a condition called hydrocephalus, which basically means water on the brain. It happens when that cerebrospinal fluid doesn't drain right, causing it to build up and put pressure on the brain. As an infant, he got the standard treatment, a shunt. It's just a tiny tube that drains the extra fluid away from the brain so it can be absorbed by the body. The shunt worked perfectly for years. For some reason, it was removed when he was 14. For the next 30 years, something happened, but it happened in absolute slow motion. The fluid started building up again. Millimeter by millimeter, year after year, the pressure grew, and the ventricles began to expand. But because this was happening over 3 entire decades, his brain did something incredible. It adapted. And this brings us to the real hero of the story: neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the brain's almost magical ability to rewire itself. It can create new connections and reroute pathways when it's injured, when we learn, or in this case, when it's being slowly squashed. Think of it like this. A stroke is like a major highway bridge suddenly collapsing, causing instant gridlock and chaos. But for this man, it was like a 30-year-long road closure. As one street slowly shut down, the brain's traffic controllers had plenty of time to patiently redirect every car to a new route. Functions that once took up a superhighway were rerouted onto smaller but super efficient side streets. His brain literally rewired itself on the fly, packing all of its essential operations into that tiny, surviving layer of tissue. Section 4. The brain we thought we knew. When this case was published in 2007, it rocked the world of neuroscience. It was a direct challenge to the old textbook idea that the brain is made of highly specialized parts, that you absolutely need this specific part for memory, and that specific part for vision. This man was living proof that the brain is way more flexible than we ever gave it credit for. More tests revealed even more astonishing details. The man's IQ was 75. Now the average is 100, but a score of 75 doesn't mean he was incapable. He was a functioning member of society, holding a job and maintaining relationships, things that his brain scans suggested should be flat out impossible. His case suggests that maybe the organization of our neurons is more important than the sheer number of them. That remaining 10% of his brain wasn't just a fraction of a whole. It was a hyper-compressed, incredibly efficient command center that had learned to do the work of the other 90%. It opened the door to a radical new idea that plasticity isn't just a neat feature for recovery, but a fundamental principle of how the brain works. This case makes you wonder, right? It's a question that sounds like science fiction, but it's now a real scientific debate. How much of our brain do we actually need to be us? If you find these deep dives into the limits of the human body as fascinating as we do, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell. You won't want to miss what we uncover next. Section 5. Consciousness and the phantom brain. Beyond the physical brain, this is where the story gets really weird and pushes us into the realm of consciousness itself. For centuries, scientists and philosophers have argued about where our sense of self comes from. Is it spread across the whole brain? Or is there one little spot, the command center, that generates you? This case is a powerful argument against a single consciousness spot. If that existed, this man should have been in a coma. One cognitive psychologist, Axel Clearmans, has a mind-bending theory called the radical plasticity thesis. He argues that consciousness isn't something the brain has, but something the brain learns to do. Essentially, our brain is constantly building a story about itself, and that story is our consciousness. This man's brain, even though it was tiny, never forgot how to tell that story. It suggests consciousness is less about the hardware and more about the incredibly sophisticated software it's running. Conclusion: The story of the man who lived a normal life with his brain squashed to 10% of its size is more than just a medical curiosity. It's a humbling lesson in the raw power of adaptation. It shows us that the organ in our heads isn't a static piece of hardware, but a living, breathing universe that can rewrite its own rules to survive. It's a testament to our resilience and a stark reminder that the greatest mysteries in the universe aren't out in the stars, but right here, inside our own skulls.